The top business stories live from the Sky Newsroom. UK house prices hit a new record high, just shy of £300,000, ahead of an increase in stamp duty. Bargain hunting shoppers give retailers a boost, with footfall rising despite a disappointing Christmas. And how artificial intelligence is coming for your job. We'll hear from the team behind a new study which claims that 70% of computer-based roles could be under threat. A very good morning on this Friday. Business Live with me, Darren McCaffrey. The average UK house price hit a new record high in January, ahead of an increase in stamp duty. New figures from the mortgage lender Halifax show that the average price is now just shy of £300,000. That's up 0.7% from December, and an annual rise of 3%. The rise was much stronger than economists had been expecting. Let's speak to Tom Bill. He's head of UK residential research at the estate agent Knight Frank. Very good morning to you, Bill. This shows a sign that the housing market is incredibly resilient.
I think there have certainly been, there have been mixed signals, I suppose, in recent weeks. We have had signs of resilience. As you say, the Halifax this morning was generally pointing in the right direction. I think things have calmed down a little bit since the start of January. But I think it's worth remembering you actually still have some fairly attractive mortgage offers that are floating around the system that kind of that predate the budget. And so all of that financial pain that we've seen as borrowing costs have climbed in recent months hasn't quite fed through fully into the housing market yet. So activity has been okay in recent months, but there are still sort of some pretty large risks around on the horizon.
And what impact will the change in stamp duty next month have on all of this? Are we seeing a kind of rush of first-time buyers?
I think it's going to be a busy March for conveyancers and anyone involved in the buying and selling process. Understandably, I think there's up to £2,500 you can save if you transact before the end of April, before the end of March, should I say. First-time buyers, that's even higher. That's over £6,000 potentially. So that certainly, I think, is helping to drive activity and focus the minds, particularly of first-time buyers at the moment.
The interesting thing, isn't it, Tom, if you are a first-time buyer, that actually you can get caught out either way, that you think you're saving money with the stamp duty, but maybe house prices have gone up, so in the end, actually not really saving very much money at all.
Yes, I mean, we forecast that prices are going to be rising pretty modestly this year. So there's always an argument for acting sooner rather than later. It'll come down to individual circumstances. As I say, mortgage offers will be there that may start to lapse. And then if you go back to the lender, the offer might not be as attractive as it once was. So you have to sort of factor in all of these things, as well as, of course, things like the spring statement at the end of March. What direction is the country going in? The slightly confusing messages from the Bank of England yesterday. There's a lot to digest at the moment.
Tom, this is obviously not across the board. This is an average figure, isn't it? And I've been reading recently that house prices that had jumped quite significantly in places like the home counties during the pandemic, people thinking, oh, I want to get out of London, that actually they've slipped back. Is that right?
I think certainly those markets have come back down from the highs of the pandemic. That's certainly true. People are sort of still. It'll take a number of years, I suppose, for people to recalibrate their work, their life balances. But actually, at the moment, we're starting to see some signs of positivity, and where we are seeing those signs of positivity does tend to be actually in those sort of domestic markets that are driven by people that need to move for schooling and jobs, tend to have lower levels of debt in the property. So the lower your loan to value, the less affected you are by rising mortgage rates. So we actually are starting to see some quite strong levels of activity in parts of southwest London and into the home counties at the moment.
And Tom, just coming back, to first-time buyers, if I can. We talk about rising house prices as if it's positive news. In some ways it is, clearly, particularly if you own a home. But it's a constant reminder, isn't it, that, for a lot of first-time buyers, people who want to get on that property ladder, the ladder keeps getting longer and longer, if you like, because house prices overall, and I'm looking at a chart here, they don't necessarily rise at the same speed all the time, but they are consistently going up.
I mean, affordability is a problem that the market has faced for a number of years that predates the pandemic. And so you've had more people, for example, that have been leaving London to find, more bang for their buck in other parts of the country. And that's still going on, even within the capital. People are looking in cheaper areas of the capital. And that's happening across the country since the global financial crisis, where London really sort of accelerated away from the rest of the country. I think that's now coming back and the rest of the country is sort of catching up. I don't think the gap is going to close, but driven by these affordability pressures, then I think you will see certain parts of the country where house prices are relatively more affordable see stronger levels of house price growth.
Yeah, and I see the strongest growth is actually in Northern Ireland, though probably got some of the lowest house prices in the UK. London retaining its top spots, unsurprisingly, I think 548,000 for the average house. Just finally, Tom, we obviously had this big announcement yesterday from the Bank of England when it comes to interest rates, which should lead to lower mortgages, certainly if we see further rates this year. What impact will that have on the housing market, coupled with the government's target of building more homes?
I mean, on the first point, I think the cut was largely priced in. Plus, you have mortgage lenders that are already operating on very tight margins. So I'm not sure we'll see an immediate shift downwards in terms of the lending rates that we're seeing, which is probably disappointing news. I think it's always based on the outlook. It's based on how many rates the markets are expecting, how many rate cuts that the markets are expecting there to be. And yesterday there was some, as I say, some fairly conflicting signals from the Bank of England, who sort of said that inflation was going to be higher than expected, growth was going to be lower than expected, but they appeared to turn more dovish at the same time. So it's a tricky one to read. And in terms of the sort of government's aim of building 1.5 million houses, I'm not sure that I think politicians routinely overestimate their ability to get housing targets met. Improving the planning system isn't necessarily going to increase the number of houses that are built. That's more about demand. And we've seen starts and sales fall off recently because of those higher mortgage rates, not because things got tied up in the planning system. It will definitely help. The planning system needs to be looked at, but I'm not sure it's as easy as some politicians think from all parties.
Into, I think that is true throughout the last couple of decades, that simply asking for more homes doesn't mean they get built. Tom, appreciate your time this morning. Tom Bill there from Knight Frank. Thank you. Now, some good news for retailers after a disappointing festive period. Bargain hunting shoppers helped to drive a rise in footfall in January. Overall store visits were up 6.6% year on year. Now, that's a significant jump from December, when retailers saw 2.2% fewer shoppers than the previous Christmas. Retail parks enjoyed the biggest rise in January, with the number of visits up 7.9% compared to 2024. Well, Tom Holder is from the British Retail Consortium. We pointed out there, didn't we? It wasn't the best of Christmases, but quite a good, strong start to the year.
I think there's been a lot of deep discounting by retailers, and that's really, compelled some people to go out and get to the shops. I think things that, we've heard doing well, a lot of textiles, furniture, the types of things that people really want to go into a shop, touch, feel, sit down on. And that's helped retail footfall rise, a bit more than maybe was expected.
Isn't that interesting, though, Tom? Because, I think you're right. Shops have had to cut a lot of prices to get people back in, to keep them buying, if you like. But at the same time, we can buy most things online. We're world leaders in the UK of buying things online. So why then, and the weather wasn't great in January for large parts of the country, what is it simply the bargains to be had that's driven people back, I suppose, is my fundamental question.
I think there's a few things. I think there's the bargains driving people back in. There's also a few points that the reporting period this month included a few extra December days, because it's not the calendar month, it works on the ONS one, which gave a little bit of an improvement versus last year. There were a couple of extra holiday days in there, so that will have boosted the footfall numbers. Similarly, some quite weak comparables on last year where footfall wasn't doing so well. So even a sort of ordinary January was going to have a bit of an uptick. But those bargains are really helping. Retailers are really trying to do whatever it takes to get people into the shops.
And we're talking, it seems that retail parks have done pretty well.
Retail parks consistently have been having the best showing. I think that reflects a sort of long-term trend, people wanting to drive their cars, to have somewhere to park easily, but also with the weather, the storms that were going on, people didn't want to be, walking down the high street so much. I think people were heading to the retail parks, popping in. Retail parks also selling a lot of those furniture, those bigger items that people have been buying in January, rather than just maybe the electronics and the gadget bumps that you get in Black Friday and Christmas period.
We must talk about the future, though, Tom, because the expectation is it's going to be a pretty tough year, isn't it? We have got, that rise in national insurance coming, which could mean that actually some people may well get laid off. And that means, of course, that unemployment could go up, fewer people in jobs. Inflation's expected to tick up. That's what the Bank of England said yesterday. And we've got a pretty stagnant economy. The wider picture for retailers, whether they're on the high street or not, is not great.
Yeah, they're certainly not out of the woods, and a good month doesn't mean a good year. So, from what we can see, retailers are facing around 7 billion in new costs this year from employer NICs changes, the rising national living wage, and indeed the new extended producer responsibility, essentially the packaging levy that comes in October. And that 7 billion has to come from somewhere. They'll try and absorb costs where they can, but ultimately it's going to mean higher prices and likely lower investment in stores and in jobs. So a worrying time for many in retail. And for consumers too. We saw a survey that was done of CFOs and of financial directors a couple of months ago, which showed that 2/3 of retailers were looking to raise prices this year. And our own forecasting says that prices are going to be well up for food. It could be as high as 5% by the end of the year, which is going to put further squeeze on households. So it is a difficult time. And what we really need is government to act, and the way they can is on the business rates reforms that they're proposing. We, like the fact that they recognise this huge burden which retail faces in business rates. We pay over a fifth of all business rates in the country.
Yeah.
They're hoping to bring that down. What we need to see is that no shop ends up paying more. So no shop ends up in this high threshold, which looks like it's going to have its rates increased rather than decreased.
OK, Tom, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Tom Holder there from the British Retail Consortium. Thank you. Let's bring you up to date with some of the rest of the business news on this Friday morning. And Amazon shares have dipped 3.3% in pre-market trading after the retailer's cloud growth fell short of expectations. The Seattle-based company joined Microsoft and Google in reporting weaker than expected cloud figures. India's central bank has cut interest rates for the first time in nearly 5 years. The Reserve Bank of India reduced its main rate from 6.5% to 6.25% in an effort to counter slowing growth in Asia's third largest economy. Hong Kong's government says it will file a complaint against new US tariffs with the World Trade Organization. Donald Trump ordered the US to impose an additional 10% tariff on Chinese goods and end a customs exception that allowed small value parcels to enter America tax-free. And don't forget, you can get more on that, indeed the rest of the business news, on our Money blog. All you need to do is scan that QR code that's on your screen right now. It'll take you to the Sky News website or the Sky News app for the very latest. Now, does your work involve using a computer? Well, this could make for a little bit of uncomfortable viewing because new research has found that as much as 70% of tasks in computer-based jobs could be transformed or replaced by artificial intelligence. Let's speak to Costin Young, who is head of AI at the Institute for Public Policy Research. That's the think tank that's carried out this study. 70%, Costin, is a hell of a large figure.
It is. And if you told me 2 years ago that we would come up with these findings, I would have laughed you out of the room. But the fact is, AI has advanced very quickly over the last 2 years. We have leading models bossing science exams, English exams on undergraduate and even graduate level. Like a few weeks ago, we had DeepSeek from the Chinese model show this to the world that these models are even cheap now. You have AI that can act autonomously online and execute actions. And people are increasingly less likely to be able to distinguish between humans and AI. So all this put together, we take this and we look at all the tasks in the UK economy, which is heavily knowledge-based. About half of tasks in the UK economy are knowledge tasks. And we find that just a lot of these tasks can be at least aided by those cutting-edge models.
So give us an example. What are we talking about here? What type of jobs?
Sure,
give us an example.
Yeah, so it's customer relations, for example, answering customer questions. Some companies like Klarna, which is a fintech company, they've already they're doing a lot of their customer engagement with AI. It's used in script writing in Hollywood. It is used for content creation in marketing, and it's used in finance for a lot of back office tasks. So we're currently moving from an experimentation phase to a lot of firms being much more seriously in incorporating this into their business processes.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to the governor of the Bank of England yesterday saying that he didn't think AI was going to replace jobs, just aid them. You guys seem to be suggesting the change will be more profound. Are we genuinely talking here about millions of people effectively being made redundant because AI is doing their job instead?
So, first of all, there is this idea that AI is just a nice tool that helps us all do our jobs better. But if you look at the most recent models, they're just so good and autonomous, right? They can do lots of different steps and execute tasks, and it looks a lot more like what humans do when they do remote working, for example. So I think that the jury is still out whether jobs will be replaced, and it partly depends on what policy does, because at the moment, we have this big international summit with heads of state in Paris coming up where they talk about AI. And all that people are talking about is accelerating AI deployment, which will be good. But what we need is more policies that actually direct AI into the areas where we want it to be deployed, and also away from areas where it's actually a bit more iffy. So I think this is really, it's worth pausing what an important moment this is.
Yeah.
And we need more bold policy, which currently it's a bit too timid.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it certainly could be probably the most transformative things that may well have happened to us as human beings. Certainly no doubt about that. But what about the 30% who could feel a little bit safer this morning? I mean, for example, I'm not expecting an AI-powered robot to cut my hair anytime soon. I'm not entirely sure I'd want that to happen. Whose jobs are kind of a bit protected?
Sure. So, things that jobs and tasks where we value human engagement, including, teachers, doctors, but also, a lot of customer relations jobs, a lot of, community work. These are areas where we will, for a long time, want human interaction. And, mechanical jobs, installing heat pumps in homes. A lot of the green transition, in fact, will require human hands to install it. So, and we have a lot of needs in the economy as well. So it's not that there is no need for human engagement.
Okay.
But again, we need more policy that actually incentivizes AI deployment in the good areas, and also incentivizes humans to transition into areas like health prevention as well, like community health centers.
Okay.
And we are not seeing that yet, and that's, I think, the next step in this AI saga that we're in.
I noticed, Carsten, you didn't say newsreaders there, which severely disappointed me. But thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go. You're watching Business Live here on Sky News. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, the markets, how they're doing on this Friday morning. The FTSE down a little. We'll have all the details after this quick commercial break. Stay tuned.
Once almost lost, these denizens of the deep are back.
The problem for these whales is global warming. Water temperatures are rising.
We're worried that the animals are actually starting to starve.
Deadly and outdated. What do you think should happen to the nets?
I would like to see them go.
I'm Nicole Johnston, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Beijing.
A towering monument to the China dream and its demise.
From one end of this country to the other, China is littered with real estate that's falling apart.
China is facing a tsunami of the elderly.
We have to work as long as health allows, otherwise, no money.
China is under pressure to pay for the pensions of 500 million retirees. I've reported on a wide range of stories from around the world.
Mass protests forced the president to flee.
The sight of the president's private swimming pool only reinforces to Sri Lankans the great divide here between rich and poor.
Aid groups say Gaza is now the world's most dangerous place to be a child.
The Israeli army has raided towns and villages all over the West Bank. These tunnels run all over Gaza. The Gaza Strip is ridden with them.
A referendum designed to unite the country has only deepened its divide.
Sydney's floodplains underwater again. This is the third or fourth time in 18 months that their homes have gone under. Sky News, the full story first. It may seem like a gimmicky toy, but it is part of the global race between the United States and China for new technology.
This elite engineering designed to humour and to help us.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free, wherever you get your news.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
I just took a shower above the couch. You know why? Because this is the Emirates A380. Fly Emirates, fly better.
A very welcome back to Business Live on this Friday. Let's get more on the markets now. Delighted to say we're joined by Daniela Haythorne, Senior Market Analyst at Capital.com. Very good morning to you, Daniela. And I noticed that on the front pages of lots of the papers this morning here in the UK is clearly Bank of England, interest rates, but more fundamentally, that growth forecast saying that we're going to grow by half as much this year as had been expected.
Yeah, as you said, we had the Bank of England meeting yesterday, and on the first part is we actually saw what is called a dovish cut. So markets were anticipating the Bank of England to cut by 25 basis points, which is what we got. But essentially, the messaging around this cut is also very important. And at this meeting, we kind of got the sense that the Bank of England is starting to be more acceptant, if you will, at the fact that they need to start lowering rates again. Now, one of the big key issues from this meeting was the fact that it was a unanimous vote to cut rates, but 2 members of the 9 MPC members actually voted to cut rates not by 25 but by 50 basis points, so double the amount. Now that is quite a dovish turn. out of those two, Swati Dhingra it's kind of expected. She's been a long-term dove, but Catherine Mann was a big dissenter there because she's thought to be a long-term hawk within the Bank of England. She's been, in fact, lobbying for higher rates to keep inflation under control. And now she's done a 180 and she's now lobbying for 50 basis points at this meeting. So that kind of gives a little bit of a, as I said, that dovish take of what are they actually seeing? What are they concerned about? And from the messaging from the governor after the meeting in the press conference, we actually got the same feeling where he was talking about the fact that the central bank cannot prevent short-term inflation influences. And a lot of the messaging saying that the rise in short-term inflation is actually coming mostly from external factors that are not persistent to the UK economy. So essentially saying, let's not worry about that short-term spiking inflation. Let's worry about the long term. And that seems to be a bit of a shift in the messaging.
And that inflation figure could change, of course, if there are Trump tariffs in place. This has also been a week in which we've seen the FTSE yet again do really well, hitting record highs. What's behind that?
Yeah, we've got this strong picture, not only in the FTSE, but mainland Europe as well. The Stock 600 performing incredibly well. And also US equities picking up a little bit. Now, overall, the sentiment is strong, and that's generally something that spreads across the Atlantic. But also you have to think of it from the fact that the Bank of England is starting to cut rates once again, and this messaging suggests more cuts. In fact, there's been a repricing expectations. The next 25 basis point cut from the BOE is now expected to be in May compared to June prior to the meeting. So obviously, markets are more comfortable that rates are coming down. That creates a favourable environment for the economy. It also softens the pressure on the Labour government, and we know there's been quite a bit of turmoil recently as to how they're going to react in March to this increase in borrowing costs that we saw recently, given that rapid rise in yield. So it's all creating a bit more of a favourable environment. Earnings are holding up as well. That's good for sentiment. And even though we've had a bit of a scare earlier this week with Trump's tariffs,
Okay, Daniela, we're going to have to leave it there. We're out of time, we're afraid. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, that's it from me for this morning. Back at 4:30 this afternoon. I will see you then.